Now continuing with your B2, we have the next topic on agenda, the financial valuation methods part 1. So what we will be covering in this specific module, we will be learning how to value securities, shares. There are two specific methods, the absolute valuation models and the relative valuation model. So let us discuss different methods discussed in absolute valuation models and the relative valuation models. So first let's discuss absolute valuation model. Before we can fully understand the idea of absolute valuation method, we need to first understand the concept of annuities, perpetuities, what you call the time value of money. So absolute valuation method, basically it calculates the intrinsic value of an asset based upon the present value of the future cash flows. Let's say a firm is expected to generate these cash flows in the future, 90,000, 180,000, 10,000, 15,000, and for other periods. So if we could discount these future cash flows to their present value, discounting these future cash flows to their present value, the number that we will get will be the intrinsic value of the assets, and this is how we can value the stock, right? So that's the basic idea. But let us first discuss some components of discounting. First, we have annuities. I'm sure all of you know it. You would have done in your earlier studies in your CMA as well. Annuities are a series of equal cash flows. Like let's say I have 4 equal payments coming in year 1, 2, 3, and 4. Let's say the first payment is 90, second 90, third 90, fourth 90. So we use annuities when there is a series of equal cash flows spread over a number of periods. How we can discount them, how we can bring them to their present value, we have this formula. Let me explain. C here represents the annual amount that you receive, the periodic amount. In our example, it's 90. R is the rate of return. That's the discount rate we will use. Let's say that is 10%. And T is the number of years. Let's say 4 years. So if you plug in these numbers, R, T, and C, you will get the present value of these 490 cash flows that are coming in the next 4 years. So this is pretty complex. So what you will get on your exam, you will get the annual cash flows. Like how do we solve it on your exam? You will be given the annual cash flows, like you receive 94 payments of 90 each. So this is the amount. You will be given the annuity factor. The annuity factor for 4 years at 10%. You would be provided this number. This is basically the simplification of this factor. So you will just multiply 90 with that annuity factor and you will be able to calculate the present value of the annuity. So you don't have to go for detailed computations and putting the numbers in this complex arrangement. You will just get the annuity factor, multiply that annuity factor with the regular cash flow, equal cash flow every year, and you will get the present value of the annuity, right? So this is how we calculate the present value of the future cash flows if they are equal. What if they are not equal? We will discuss that later. Now, the next concept is the perpetuities. Now, let's say if this $90 that you receive in year 1, 2, and 3, and 4, let's say this continues for many years into the future. It goes on till infinity. The cash flows occur for a very long period of time and it doesn't terminate till infinity. So this is called perpetuity. There are some assumptions regarding annuities that you must know. Annuities mean the recurring or regular amount you receive every period. In our example, it was 90. So the first assumption is that you receive a fixed amount, in our example, $90 every year. Second important point is that you need to have an appropriate discount rate, the rate which we use for discounting. Third, you need to have the duration of the annuity. Is it for 4 years in our example, 10 years, 15 years? So you need to have a specific time for it. And finally, you need to also know the timing of annuity. Remember, the time means the total duration. In our example, it was 4 years. And the next fourth point, the fourth assumption is timing. Timing means when do you receive the cash flow or when do you pay the cash flow? Cash flow could be inflow, it could be outflow. So timing means, is it the yearly cash flow occurring at the end of the year? Is it the quarterly cash flow? Is it the monthly cash flow? Is it the payment to be made right now? or is it the payment to be made at the end of every year? The question will explicitly give the information regarding the amount, the discount rate to be used, the total time covered under annuity, and the timing of annuity. You will have it there in the question, so no need to be worried about it. Next, we have perpetuity, as I told you. If the cash flows go on and on till eternity, cash flows last till the end of time, then how do we discount this? For this, we have a very simple formula. Take the amount in the numerator and divide it the rate with the denominator. You will get the present value of the annuity. So how do we calculate? This is specifically relevant for preferred stock, because preferred stock, they give a regular fixed dividend and you divide it with the rate. So this will give you the present value of the preferred stock, or the present value perpetuity. So P here would be the stock price, right? D is the annual dividend, which will last forever, and R is the required rate of return, which we will use a discounting rate. So if you plug in the numbers, you will be able to find the present value of the perpetuity. So let's try some questions here. Baker Corporation pays a constant annual dividend per year of $5. This is D. Abel wants to invest Baker and earn a 20% rate of return. This is the desired rate of return we have just discussed. So calculate the value of the Baker stock. Now, the price is equal to the dividend, annual dividend, that is $5, and divide it with the expected rate of return, that is 20%. So 5 upon 20%, that will give you $1.25. So which means if you purchase the stock for $25, you should expect $5 dividend every year till eternity, till the end of time. Okay, now next we have the constant growth dividend discount model, sometimes called as the dividend discount model. What we are doing the absolute valuation methods, the present value of the future cash flows to value a stock or value a company's share. Constant growth dividend discount model, or sometimes called the Gordon growth dividend discount model, sometimes simply DDM, dividend discount model. What the basic assumption of this model is that if we could discount the future dividends of the company, like dividend in the year 1 is D1, D2, D3, D4, and it goes on and on till infinity, till forever. Let's say the last dividend is D infinity. If we can discount these dividends in the present terms, discounting these dividends to the present term will give us the current share price as of today. So the value of the stock under the dividend discount model is the present value of all the expected future dividends. One assumption, the major assumption of this model, is that the dividend grow at a certain percentage. Let's say 5%. Dividends are growing 5% every year. Constant growth model means the dividend grows at a certain rate. Now this is the formula we use. We don't have to go for complex math of discounting all these future dividends to present value. This is the formula used. Price at time t is the dividend paid at time t into 1 plus G. G here represents the sustainable growth rate, the rate that will continue, the rate at which the dividend will grow for eternity, forever. R is the required rate of return. Now this is important. The version of the formula you might have studied in your CMA, you might have seen this. The current price is equal to the current dividend just paid multiplied by 1 plus growth rate divided by the cost of equity minus growth rate. It is exactly the same. Here dt is the dividend just paid now, that is D0. G is the growth rate. KE is the return required by the investors, okay, or the cost of equity, and G is the same, the growth rate, right? So remember, if you want to calculate the price now, you need to put the dividend now to be, that will grow at a certain rate G. Let's say if you have not been given the dividend that has just been paid, you have been paid the dividend the next dividend paid, which is called D1. Remember, D1 is equal to current dividend into 1 plus growth rate, which means you can replace D0 1 plus G with D1 and you will still have the formula perfectly working. So there are two versions of the formula. If you want to calculate the price of the stock now, you need to have the current dividend just paid now, just recently paid, into 1 plus growth rate upon cost of equity, the desired rate of return minus growth. Else, if the future dividend is given, you can simply plug in D1, the next dividend upon cost of equity minus G. So this is what you call the constant growth dividend discount model. Sometimes you may have to calculate KE, also called the required rate of return, for which we have a model we discussed earlier. That is the CAPM, capital asset pricing model. This is the model we can use to calculate the cost of equity or the cost of common equity. Cost of common equity is equal to the risk-free rate, which will be given to you, don't worry, plus beta, it will be given to you, the required return on market called RM, or here expected return on the market, same thing, minus the risk-free rate. So this is the version of the formula we have discussed much more in detail. And this is also called the cost of equity, sometimes cost of common equity, or just the required rate of return. And you will have all these numbers to do the computation. There are certain assumptions that you should be aware, should know. Certain assumption for the constant growth dividend discount model, very important assumption. First assumption is that the dividend grow at a certain rate forever. This is the first assumption. The dividend grow at a certain rate forever. Second assumption, the growth rate used in the dividends is the same at which the share price goes up. If the growth rate in dividend is 5%, that would mean the price of the stock will also go up by 5% every year. This could be quite a challenging assumption. Stock price and the growth rate in dividend is the same. You can challenge this, of course. And you can also challenge this assumption that the growth rate, how can it be sustainable till eternity, forever? This is questionable. And the third assumption, and which is very valid one, of course, is that your denominator should always be positive, means that your required rate of return should always be greater than the growth rate. Should always be greater than, otherwise this model will fail. Let me tell you how. Let's say if your required rate of return is 5%, whereas the growth in the dividend is 7%. Now look at this, what you will have here. R is 5%. 5 minus 7% will give you a negative denominator, which means the price of the stock is negative. This is mathematically impossible. So for this model to work, your required rate of return should always be greater than the growth rate. Now this is in continuation to the previous example. The name is the same, but this time we need to use the dividend growth model. Baker Corporation pays a current dividend per share of 5%. Remember, gentlemen, this is the current dividend paid right now. You can label it as D0, or as per your formula, it is DT. Dividend paid right now. And it is projected to grow at a 4% rate, that is growth rate. Able wants to invest in Baker and earn 20% rate of return. This is the desired rate of return. Calculate the values of the Baker stock today. So using the version of the formula given in your book, you can write the price of the stock at time t is equal to the current dividend, that is dt, times 1 plus growth rate upon r minus g. Plug in the numbers. We have dt is given as 5, growth rate is 4%, so it's going to be 1.04 upon the required rate of return is 20% minus 4%. If you do simplification, what you get is exact $32.5. This is the current stock price as per the DDM model. Now we have some variation in this requirement. Baker Corporation pays a current dividend per share of $5, that is DT, or call it D0, your choice, the same thing. And it is projected to grow at 4%, that is the growth rate. Able wants to invest in Baker and earn 20% return, that is the required rate of return or the cost of common equity. Interesting thing is, calculate the amount that the Able will pay for Baker stock 3 years from today. Beautiful question. Let's say if this is today 0, now this is year 1, this is year 2, this is year 3, this is year 4, and so on. The question says calculate the amount that the Able will pay for Baker stock 3 years from today at this point. So basically then we need to calculate what would be the dividend at this point in time, and we will use that dividend as our DT, just like we used D0 there. So we have to grow the dividend for 3 years at 4% rate. So how do we do that? So what you do, 5 is the dividend now. The dividend at the end of year 1 will be 5 into 1.04. Dividend at the end of year 2 is going to be 5 into 1.04 squared. I'm sure you know it's growing at the rate of 4%. And dividend at the end of year 3 is going to be 5 into 1.04 raised to the power 3. This is the dividend at the end of year 3, which will serve as our D naught or DT. And then you can calculate the price of the stock at the end of year 3. So price at the end of year 3 is going to be the dividend at the end of year 3 into 1 plus growth rate upon required rate return minus G. Plug in. It's going to be 5 into 1.04, 5.624, that is D3. This is the number. Into 1 plus growth rate, that is 1 plus 4%, divided by the 20% required return minus 4%. Now, if you simplify this, you should get your value of the stock at the end of year 3, and it is going to be $36.56. So we have done these 3 annuities, perpetuities, Gordon Growth Dividend Discount Model called DDM, and now a little intro to discounted cash flow analysis. We have discussed in the above 3 that the value of the stock is the future cash flows discounted. So let us expand this idea, how we can use the DCF or the discounted cash flow model to value the stock. How to calculate the value of equity by using the present value of the future cash flows. There are 3 methods to it. The first one we have already discussed, that is DDM, Dividend Discount Model. We discussed in detail. Then the second one involves the free cash flow model. There are 2 types of free cash flows. Let us discuss. One is called free cash flow to equity. Other is called free cash flow to the firm. What is the difference between these 2? Let me explain. Free cash flow to equity, just like when we prepare our cash flow statement, operating cash flow is calculated using this way. We take net income. To this we add our non-cash expenses like depreciation, like loss on disposal, right? If there is investment in working capital, it is deducted, right? And if there is any investment in long-lived assets called the capital expenditures, it is also deducted. So taking net income, deducting working capital investment, deducting capital expenditure, and adding back the non-cash expenses, this will give us free cash flow to the firm, right? Free cash flow to the firm. You can use either this model or else you might use free cash flow to equity. It is somewhat similar because cash flow from operations, let me tell you how they are correlated. Cash flow from operations is in fact the net of this result. This is the cash flow from operations. If you simplify these 3, net income, to this add non-cash expenses, adjust working capital, this 3 total gives you cash flow from operations, right? These 3 are the same as this one. Now, if you deduct the capital expenditures from this, these 2 will give you what you call the cash flow to the firm. Now, if you include net debt issued, a company might have issued bonds, company might have borrowed long-term funds from some financial institution. So net debt issued, if you bring it in, since it's an inflow, this is called free cash flow to equity. So either we go for FCF or FCFE, both can be used as our discounted cash flow analysis. So I told you there are 3 versions. The first one we have done, the dividend discount model, discounting the future dividends. Second is using the free cash flow to equity or free cash flow to the firm. I just explained this, FCFE, or just the FCF, free cash flow for the firm. The third one is called the residual income. I'm sure you are aware of this terminology. Residual income. Residual income model means income that is left over after paying all the dividends, all the interest, and whatever you had to pay, whatever remains for the business is called the residual income. So whether you use the dividends to discount to the present value, free cash flows, or the residual income, bringing these future cash flows to their present terms, this is called discounting. So this is the first step. You need to select which model you are going to use. Selected. We are going to use, let's say, the second one, free cash flow to equity. Second step is to select the suitable discount rate, the desired rate of return, which we can establish using the capital asset pricing model we just discussed a little while ago. Once we have the discount rate available using the CAPM, the third step will simply be you'll need to bring all those future cash flows to their present term, right? So bringing these future cash flows to their present terms will be the value of the equity. So this is what you call the absolute value method, where we use the actual dollar-based numbers or the estimated dollar-based numbers you will receive in the future and discounting them to the present value. Next group of ratios we have are the relative valuation models. Relative valuation models. What are relative valuation models? Relative valuation models, they do not use cash flows, discounted dividends, or the free cash flow to equity, or the residual income. Relative valuation models, they use comparable ratios, stock valuation ratios. Let us discuss these one by one. First one is the price earning ratio. I'm sure you would have done this in much more detail in your earlier studies. This is heavily used, widely used ratio. It is simply calculated by dividing the market price per share over earning per share. This is also called earning multiple, price earning multiple. So this is how we can calculate. P ratio is the P naught, that is the stock price or value today, divided by E1, that is the E1 expected earning per share 1 year into the future, or just next 4 quarters added. Right? So price earning ratio is the price of the stock divided by the expected earnings. Sometimes we might use the current earning, and you see there is a difference. If you use the future expected earnings, this is called the forward PE. This one is basically the forward PE because you are using the future earning per share. Right? That is called the forward price earning ratio. But if you use the current year's earning, that's just reported EPS for the past year or the current year that ended with the past 4 quarters added, this is called trailing price earning ratio. So if you ask me which is more suitable for valuation purposes, of course forward PE, that's futuristic. Trailing is based upon the past numbers which may not be representative of the future. So remember, if you are using the current year's earning, it's going to be trailing PE ratio, and expected earning per share will give you the forward price earning ratio. So we can use this model to value. How? We will do some questions to explain the idea. Now assume that Baker Corporation has current year earnings per share of 1.5, that is E naught, remember. Current year earnings, E naught is equal to 1.5. And anticipates earning per share is coming is $2. This is E1. E1 is equal to $2, right? So we can calculate the trailing as well as the forward PE. If the PE ratio is 7.5, calculate the expected value of Baker's share, right? So expected value, which means you are going to go for the future, right? So you need to use the future expected earnings. So the formula that we've just is that the current price can be estimated by the forward earnings, that is P naught by E1, that is the PE multiple, multiplied by the expected future earnings. So we have been given the PE multiple, that is 7.5, plug it in, multiplied by the expected future earning, that is 2. So 7.5 times 2 means the share is going to be $15. So as per the model, the share price, current stock price is going to be or should be $15. Alright, the next relative valuation model is the PEG ratio. This is how it is calculated. PEG ratio is based upon the price earning multiple, but it brings in a new number or new input, that is the growth rate. Now let me tell you something important. If PE ratio is higher, this was an important concept I should have explained earlier. Price earning multiple, market price per share over earning per share. Let's say if the market price is 100 and earning per share just 5, what it gives me is $20, 20 to 1. Means for every $1 earning, an investor is willing to pay $20 for the share. Why? Because he is expecting the company to do well in the future. So for every $1 of EPS, buyer or investor wants to, or he's willing to invest $20. He's expecting some future growth in the stock. So higher the P multiple, the better. Now we have another variation of this, it's called PEG ratio. So you can see it incorporates the price earning multiple and it brings in a new variable, growth rate. Growth rate, you need to remove the percentage sign. Remember, when you multiply the growth rate, it contains a percentage like 4%. When you bring it in here, 4%, when you remove the sign of percentage, you need to divide it with 100. So basically what you should do, growth rate here simply express in numbers with no percentage sign. Multiplying it with 100 means it will remove the percentage sign with it. So whenever the growth rate is used, use the number alone without the percentage, without converting into decimal. So this is important to remember. Okay. So this PEG ratio, it basically shows the effect of earning growth on company's PE. So far, I've discussed that price earning ratio, the higher the better. But PEG ratio, the lower the better. How come? Why lower the better? Why lower the better? We need to justify this. We just learned that PEG ratio is equal to price earning multiple divided by the growth rate. Let's say in my example, my P ratio is 20 and the growth rate is 4. What you get? 5. Let's say the growth rate is 10. 20 by 10, 2. That is much better. So higher the growth rate, higher the denominator, good for us. The firm is expected to grow at a higher rate. Since the denominator is good for us, if it's bigger, you will have a low ratio. So remember, PEG number, whatever you get, the lower, the better. Lower PEG ratios will attract many investors for the stock. So we can rearrange this formula for valuing the equity to find the share price. Just make P naught the subject of the equation, and all these variables E1 and G, they will go to this side and the formula will take a new form. It is the same. It is the same, just that here the PEG was the subject of the equation and here we have made P naught the subject of the equation. So this serves as your inputs. PEG would be given to you in most of the cases. Earning per share would be given, growth rate would be given, and you just need to plug in the numbers to find your answer. So let's apply this on a real question. Baker wants to use the PEG ratio to estimate the price of the stock. Okay, that's what we want. P naught is to be determined. The company's PEG ratio is 2.5 times. The PEG multiple is 2.5. The lower the better. Its current earnings is 5. The growth rate in earnings is anticipated to be 4. So we have just learned the formula, making P naught the subject of the equation. It's equal to PEG, which is given, multiplied by the expected EPS, multiplied by the growth rate without percentage sign. PEG multiple is 2.5. Expected earning is going to be, this is interesting. This is the current share earning per share, that is 5. We need to grow it at 4%. Here we need E1, the future, the forward earning. So for that you need to multiply 5 with 1 plus 4%, and that will give you 5.2. And then multiply it with 4, just 4, not percent, and this would give you the stock price. It's going to be 2.5 times 5.2 times 4 is $52. So this is the price as per the PEG model. The third relative valuation model we have is the price to sales ratio. Now, why would you use? This is a very interesting ratio. I love this. You know what it is? It's price as per the market price per share over sales dollar per share. This is interesting. Market price per share makes sense. You can just take it from the market. Sales per share means you divide your sale. Let's say this year's sale is $10 million and there are 1 million shares outstanding. So 10 million by 1 means your sales per share is 10. So this is interesting. Dividing your sales with number of shares. Why would you do that? The reason is that sales is hard to manipulate. You can manipulate your profit by under or over provisioning, by what you call the earning smoothing, by providing less depreciation, by charging less bad debt allowances for return. So you can manipulate your earning, but sales are hard to manipulate. That's the one reason why we use the market price per share over sales per share, right? This is the one main reason. And sometimes the company doesn't have income. When the company doesn't have income, it will not have meaningful EPS. Or when the income is very low. Remember, price earning ratio will be very meaningless when the company has losses. Because when there are losses, you have loss per share, not earning per share. Or when the incomes are very low. When incomes are very low, EPS is going to be very low. A very low EPS will be meaningless. It won't provide more meaning. So when there are losses, when a new firm is formed, or when the incomes are very little, then you should use this ratio, price to sales ratio, right? When EPS is negative or when the income is less, this is the good ratio. How do we do it? Simple. This is it. You take the market price per share over expected sales per share. It is on per share basis. Remember, market price per share, don't divide this with the total sales expected in the next year. It is sales per share, right? And we can remodel this question to find the P naught. You can see just like in the previous example, the price is equal to the PS multiple times the expected future sales. The third one done, price to sales ratio. Now we have price to cash flow ratios. This is even better because sales sometimes could be manipulated to an extent by debiting a fake customer or a related party in crediting sales. But price to cash flows are much harder to manipulate. Cash flows are much harder because they are reconciled with the balance available in the bank and the cash equivalent. So cash flows are harder to manipulate than earnings and sales. So this could be used. So what we do in this arrangement, we take the share price, the price per share divided by the cash flow from operations divided by the number of shares. Just like sales dollar per share, we have the cash flow per share, expected cash flow, the U1. And we can remodel this to find the P naught in the same way. This is the multiple multiplied with expected future cash flows. This will give you the price of the stock. So these are all relative measures, all relative. There is no discounting involved, no dollar-based numbers, all relatives. That's why it's called the relative valuation models. Okay, the last one is the price to book ratio. In this relative valuation model, we will use the market price per share and we will use the book value per share. This is easily available from the market. But how do we calculate the book value of common stock, book value per share? What you do, you simply add up all your equity. Equity means your common stock balance plus your additional contributed capital, also called the share premium, plus your any revenue or capital reserve, plus your other comprehensive income, all the components of equity other than preferred stock. So add them up and divide it with the number of shares. It will give you the book value per share. So dividing your market price per share over book value per share, this is called the PB ratio. And let's do an example to explain the concept. Let's say your market price per share is $100. And when you divide your equity with the number of shares, this will give you book value per share. Book value per share comes out to be $20. Now, what it gives us? It gives us 5-to-1. Means a share that has a book value of $1 currently is trading at $5 in the market. Book value per share is 1, has a market value of $5. What could be the reason? One of the plausible reasons could be that your assets might be at old historical values, whereas the firm is being valued at the current valuation. That's why the market price is higher, right? So there could be a difference. It is very, very unlikely that your book value per share would be the same as the market value per share, because the market value depends upon many, many factors, company's prospects, company's future potential, whereas the book value per share, it's just taken from the books, equity, common equity divided by the number of shares. We can use this model to calculate the price also by rearranging the formula. To predict the price, take the PB ratio, price to book ratio, and multiply with the book value. And let me help you calculate this. Let's take an example and explain how we can estimate the price using PB multiple. An analyst assembles the following financial and market data for Bolden Corporation's most recent year end. The analyst projects that the firm's operating cash flows will increase by 20% in the upcoming year. This is important. And it further says the current price, common stock price, is $18. Common shares outstanding 10 million. Total assets, total liabilities, preferred stock, common stock, additional paid in capital, also called the share premium in our part of the world, retained earnings, total stockholders' equity, and cash flow from operations. It says using the previous data, calculate the PB, that price to book ratio, and the price to cash flow multiples. Now, first of all, when I say price to book value, the book is only for common stock. You do not include preferred stock. Take 25 million, 45 million, 50. Khalas, nothing else. Preferred stock is not considered as a part of common equity. So if you add 25, 45 and 50, it will give you 120 million. So your equity has a book value of 120 million. And we need to find the book value per share first. 120 million divided by how many shares are outstanding? 10 million. So this will give you $12. That is the book value per share. We need to find the price to book ratio. Price to book ratio is simply the market price per share 18 Book value per share 12 straight. 18 by 12 gives you 1.5. Next, we have to find out the price to cash flow multiples. Price is already available. Cash flow multiples, for cash flow, remember it said that the cash flow is going to grow by 20%. If the current cash flow is 25 million, growing it by 20% would mean that it's going to be 30 million. So 30 million is going to be your cash flow in the future. I told you, you need to divide your sales with the number of shares. You need to divide your cash flow with the number of shares, operating cash flows. So 30 million divided by 10 million shares, it gives you $3. Now, if you need to calculate the price to cash flow multiple, so it's going to be the price, which is currently 8, and the cash flow per share is $3. So this will give you the multiple of 6. That's how we do the valuation. And finally, once you are done, you can compare your numbers with the industry, and then you can draw the relevant conclusions what we have done so far.